Well, good morning, everyone. Darren Saul here, your host of Saul Searching, the Saul Recruitment Podcast, episode 29. I hope everybody's doing really well. Today, we're going to be chatting about something fascinating and very important, more and more important every day, achieving success and fulfillment as a business leader with Brady Craig. How you doing, Brady?
Yeah, really well. Thanks, Darren. How are you?
Pleasure. Thanks for joining us.
My pleasure, mate.
Ah, well done. Now, everybody out there, Brady Craig is a human behavioural specialist that helps business leaders dissolve any mental baggage and constraints that are preventing them from being who they need to be in order to achieve their desired goals. His predominant focus is on helping people become truly fulfilled and purposeful during their endeavour to achieve their own unique version of success. And I love that, Brady, their own unique version of success, because that is just so important these days. Everybody has a different definition of what success is to them. And it's so important that we know what we actually want to achieve in our lives. Otherwise, we end up just chasing our tail and getting nowhere.
I would agree.
Absolutely. So I just love the way you put that. But, mate, I'd love to hear more about, you and why you do what you do. Maybe give us a little bit of a backstory and a bit of an intro.
Yeah, sure. There's many things I could speak to as far as, why I do what I do, but I guess I've just always had this drive to want to help people and make a difference. Something that used to float around in my mind when I was younger is, why do people do what they do? We used to be connected with some business people that, seem to have all the money in the bank, that have a nice house, but they always seem to be stressed and, sometimes depressed.
Yep.
And then, you'd watch some documentaries and things of this nature, and you'd see people over in the third world countries where they just are expressing love and gratitude. And that really started to drive my, I guess, inquisitiveness as far as, how do we determine our mind or our perspective to generate a different experience of life?
Yeah, so true. And there's a great quote that comes to mind. I think it was Earl Nightingale who said, "Success is the progressive achievement of a particular goal, not the actual achievement of it." So when you're on the journey, it's more fun and it's more successful and more engaging for you than when you actually achieve something. So a really interesting quote. I'm
100%.
always reminded about that one.
Yeah, and that's why I think understanding what our own unique version of success, that's why that's so important, because typically what I find with most of the people I work with, they're typically pursuing something that is important to someone else, whether it be their mum or their dad, or just some authority figures that they've got in their life where they've decided that that's who they need to be in order to be successful. And even though they're going down that road and they're frustrated and pissed off and all of these things, there's this sense of, once I get there, then everything will be okay.
Yeah. And you never actually get there, because when you do get there, you'll just find something else to strive for, because that's how the human mind works.
Correct.
So if we can get comfortable with enjoying the journey of getting there rather than worrying about getting there, that's where the true happiness and success comes from.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And do you think that these days this is more rampant than ever before? Like, we're mentally and emotionally on this roller coaster. We're not happy. We're, doing things to please other people. Do you think it's more prevalent these days, or has it always been the case?
I think on some level it'd be ignorant for me to, say yes or no, because obviously I wasn't living, 100 years ago or 200 years ago.
Yeah.
What I would say is, I think now that we have so many opportunities, as in, prior to COVID, we could travel all over the world if we wanted to.
Yeah.
We've got online, so we can literally have, like me and you, we connected. Now we're having this conversation, and that wouldn't have been possible, 20 years ago, probably.
That's right. And we just mentioned before, you're in Mackay, Queensland. I'm in Sydney, and look how this is happening. I think it's fantastic.
Yeah. So for me, I think because of the expansion of technology and what is possible for us, I think why it might seem more rampant is because people's, I guess, expectations have become somewhat unrealistic
Yep.
on what they should have. Because people are flicking through, Instagram and Facebook and all the stuff, and they're seeing the highlight reel of people's lives,
Yeah.
not realizing that most of those people are probably in debt, probably depressed behind the scenes, and all of these things. But because that's all we're feeding the mind, it's setting us up for failure and for misery.
So true. So true. And that's a really good point you made. I mean, social media is fantastic. I love it, but it's what we want people to see.
Correct.
It's marketing and promotion, it's not the truth.
Yep.
It's only a small percentage of what really goes on in our lives. So we have to really be careful to fall into the trap of thinking that everything we see is the holistic picture of that person or that brand or that an entrepreneur or et cetera, et cetera. Really good point.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
It can be very dangerous.
It can be, and it's one of those things which I think everything is, it can be used for progress and growth and well-being, and then used in a different form, it can be quite destructive. So it really just depends on the person utilizing the technology and what they're going to do with it.
Yeah, so true. You have to be so self-aware and really have a good grounding of where you're at, which kind of leads me to my next question in a way. I mean, so what should we do? What strategies do you have that you think we can put in place? What should we do to try and not fall into the trap of chasing our tail and, being victim of external circumstances?
Yeah, sure. So the first thing that comes to mind is, it might sound a little bit grandiose, and a lot of people bang on about this stuff, but they don't really know the fundamental pieces, which is purpose.
Yep.
If we don't have a sense of purpose in our lives, we will automatically regress into the part of the brain called the amygdala. Yep. And we will be hardwired to search for pleasure and to avoid pain. Uh-huh. So based on my observation of, the many different people I've worked with, very, very, very few people I meet along my journey, and the conversations I have are clear on why they are here,
yeah,
and how they're going to make that, progress and grow and develop.
Yep.
So it's sort of one of those things. It's sort of it's psychology, but it's also biology, because if we lack clarity on what our purpose is on a biological level, we actually regress back into the part of the brain that will search for pleasure over pain.
Right. So it's almost like an active mental hack to make sure we stay on the right track.
Yeah, it's one of those things that first we need to become aware of, because most people have heard the word purpose, and typically, in the corporate world, purpose is one of those things that people roll their eyes over, because there's all these companies that have their purpose statements that mean nothing. Yeah. It's just a bit of writing on the wall. But when people actually take the time to understand their values and understand what is truly, truly important to them, they get this sense of, I guess, true north.
I like that.
And there's a sense of direction, which means no matter what's happening in my life, it's going to help me move towards my true north.
Awesome. And a good example of that, I was reading something, or I was listening to something the other day, but I can't remember what it was. And it was by a successful entrepreneur. And he said, every decision he's made in his life, he always took the time to think about what would be best for his family. And that would drive his decision, his business decisions, or whatever they would be. And every time he did that, everything worked out, because that was his purpose. That was his North Star, his family and his home life, more important than his work life. So that's a perfect example of, understanding yourself to such a degree, having such a level of self-awareness that you can make those decisions and make sure you stay at true north.
100%. That's a great example, Darren, because, for some people it is family, that is the most important thing. And then, business will come under that in the hierarchy. Mm-hmm. For myself, my current value set is helping people. So basically any decision that I need to make, it basically is what's going to allow me to help the most amount of people. And then I continue to go down the things that are most important to me to, make a decision.
Yeah, love it. And that's a really good point you brought up as well, is that throughout people's lives, your North Star can change.
Exactly.
At certain ages, at certain times in your life, you value different things and you might have slightly different priorities, and things are always moving. But the key is to know where you're at every point in time, which is, easier said than done, obviously, but
yeah. That's the thing. It's sort of like, gym. If you can talk about lifting weights and you can talk about going to the gym, but unless you actually go to the gym and do the work, you're not going to get the result. And that's what I find a lot of people in the personal development world. There's a lot of talk, there's a lot of intellectual understanding, but there's very few people that actually take the time, sit down and do the work.
Yeah, so true. And so, I mean, obviously you're a coach, you coach people, you work with people.
Yep.
What makes you different from all the other coaches, all the other self-development gurus out there?
Yeah, well, I think, as I've mentioned to you before, I try not to put myself under the category of coaching just due to the many connotations that come along with that word.
Yep.
But really, I think most people, I would assert everyone in the industry in coaching or therapy or consulting, most people have a genuine intent to want to make a difference. However, due to, I guess, some of the methodologies that are being utilized in the coaching world, there's limitations inherently put in those methodologies.
Yep.
To give you an example, like my first accreditation was a coaching certification, and what I like to sort of document a few things and keep sort of track of things. And what I was noticing with clients is when I was working with them, they were having a great life.
Yep.
We were working on things, progressing, but I'd see them maybe 6 months after we would stop working together, and it would be the same old sort of story, but different. It would be a different problem, but the same sort of thing. And that for me was really concerning to go, okay, someone's investing their money, their time, their energy, their focus in me, and then long term they're not actually generating the outcome over a sustainable period.
Yeah.
So that's when I really started to question, I guess, my initial training and perspective, which was a lot about positive thinking. You know what I mean? Like, just be positive. The Tony Robbins thing of peak state, put yourself into a peak state and forget your worries and just move on and take action. You know what I mean? It's like all this very logical, strategic doing.
Yep.
And that makes a transient change, but it doesn't make a long-term sustainable change. So what I've done over the last couple of years is heavily mentored under a guy called Dr. John Demartini.
Yep, I've heard of him for sure.
Yeah, and he has basically studied over 300 disciplines in chemistry, psychology, physics, biology, astrology, basically from the bottom up all the way to the macro. He's studied it all and found the common links between every discipline. Right. And he's condensed it down and how that relates to human behavior and what it is that we can do to really build a solid foundation in the mind to generate long-term sustainable progress and growth.
Right. And what was that common denominator or those main common denominators?
So I guess the main tenet of John's work is nothing is either good or bad, but thinking makes it so. The William Shakespeare quote.
Okay.
Now, a lot of people, when they hear that quote, they're like, yeah, that sounds good. I understand it, which again is an intellectual process. Not too many people are actually willing to go through and find the benefits to their, quote unquote bad situation, or find the drawbacks to their quote unquote good situation, because it's an energetic sort of exhausting process to take something that we currently believe is either good or bad and actually make it neutral.
Yeah. Yeah, that's pretty tough.
Yeah, so that's basically a predominant amount of my work is taking people's past, because past hurt informs future fear.
Hmm.
And when we have that mental baggage, which is sitting in the subconscious mind, that is basically logged as a judgment,
Yep.
unless we actually recalibrate the mind as far as perceptions go to find an equal amount of benefits to an equal amount of drawbacks, that will stay in the subconscious mind,
Yeah.
weighing us down, exhausting us, making us fearful of the future, making us look back to the past, which
Yep.
means we're not able to be present.
Yep.
So from my perspective, if people want to be great leaders or great fathers or great mothers or whatever it is that they want to do the best to the best of their ability, they need to be present. And based on the work, it's impossible to be present if you've got judgments sitting in the mind.
That's right. All this bias. Yeah. So in other words, it's almost another way of talking about detachment as well.
To a certain degree, it's detachment sort of like the first, I guess, step that most people take, where something happens and they disassociate from it.
Yep.
And they sort of, it's a bit like, throwing your dirty laundry in a room and shutting the door.
Okay. Yeah. It's not gone away. It's just kind of
It's
removed.
hidden.
Yeah.
It's hidden. And typically what I see and hear quite a lot of is people like, Brady, I just have these mental breakdowns every now and then. For some people it's like monthly. They're like once a month they just have a boiling over point where they're just feeling out of
Meltdown.
control.
Yep. Yep.
And then they can switch it back on, and then a month later it happens again.
Yep.
And what that tells me is they haven't taken care of the root cause.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess to answer your question before, I believe that's what separates me from most people in this field. Is a lot of people think they're treating the root cause, but they're not.
Gotcha.
They're treating something a little bit along the line
Mm-hmm.
that looks like the root cause, but it's not actually the root cause.
Mm-hmm.
And this is the power of John's work, which is truly understanding the chemistry and the way the mind works to really go in there and get that lowest denominator piece.
And so does this have like a counseling or an NLP, route to it, or when you start working to get to those deeper levels, you have to work with some of those tools?
So I was, my prior training was in NLP, so I'm very aware of all of those models,
Mm-hmm.
and they do have their place. They are very helpful at times, yet again, they're sort of those tools are particularly ones that will make a short-term change, but not a long-term change.
I see. Okay.
Because the best example is, let's say someone criticizes you and they make you feel terrible.
Yep.
NLP or typical types of therapy will basically help you detach from what had happened so that you can move on. So
Right.
it'll be like, okay, we'll remove it from the mind to a certain degree, and we'll help you refocus back on your life or
Right.
whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the problem with that is, okay, I've worked on that, but what happens when I get criticized again by someone else? Now I've got to go through the exact same process, which might take 3 sessions, which might take,
Yep.
$1,000.
Yep.
From my perspective, I'd rather take that event, help the person see it's neutral, no longer fear it, which means on some level, they're no longer going to attract that same circumstance. And then if it were to happen, it does not bother them, because they're already able to see how it's benefiting them, how it's helping them, how it's helping them grow further towards their true north.
Gotcha. So you dig deeper, really.
It's really about helping people recognize that no matter what happens in their life, it can either harm them or it can help them.
Yep.
And I would prefer them to see how it's going to help them.
Love it. Love it. And I kind of want to get into how you work in a sec, but I just want to change the focus a little bit towards the business side of things and business leaders in particular. So,
Sure.
I mean, where do you see this being so important in terms of the business world and business leaders, emerging business leaders these days?
Yeah. So as we can all appreciate, there's many factors that determine, I guess, the success of an organization. You know, it's sales, it's marketing, it's operations, it's quality of
Logistics,
work.
everything. Yep.
It's a whole bunch of things. And one of the things that I think everyone can agree upon is pretty much a human being is a part of nearly all of those processes, unless it's, you know, a completely technological organization.
Yep.
For most businesses, it's human to human interaction, whether it's from a leader to a team member or from a business to a business, you know, because B2B is really just human to human.
Yep, exactly. They call it P2P, person to person.
That's right.
We're all P2P, really. Yeah.
That's right. So for me, it's helping people truly understand themselves, because when we firstly don't understand, you know, what drives us, we don't know what our true north is, that means we are going to have volatility in the mind. We will experience volatility emotionally. And again, some people can seem like they're not volatile, but it's just under the surface.
Yep.
And under the surface, they're stressed out, they're probably sick, they've got, you know, digestion issues and all sorts of things.
Yep.
So that's, you know, one piece. Then comes in the communication piece, which is, if I don't know what's important to me, it's going to be very unlikely that I know what's important to you, you know, referring to a team member. And if I don't know what's important to the person I'm trying to influence, I have very little ability to actually influence that person.
Nice.
Now, that leads into underperformance. That leads into, you know, the inability to have tough conversations, because, again, most people are searching for pleasure, avoiding pain. Yep. Now, what is an accountability conversation typically along the lines of? Is it pleasurable or uncomfortable?
Yep.
It's typically an uncomfortable process. Definitely. And that's why most people avoid it. And then that leads to high performers leaving the organization because they're sick of other people getting away with stuff that they probably shouldn't be.
Gotcha.
You know, so there's a myriad of different, I guess, unique circumstances that my clients go through. But at the end of the day, it's how we relate to ourselves. It's how we relate to the people who are working for us. Yep. And then obviously all the way down to the client or the consumer.
Yep. I love that. So it's really doing this kind of work on yourself not only helps yourself and your own performance, but helps you understand other people and therefore gets more out of the other person as well.
That's right. And, you know, one of the common things that that actually arises when I'm working with business leaders is typically, you know, we'll start with business issues and business problems. And then once someone gets comfortable with me enough, they start to tell me about their relationships at home, you know, whether it be with their husband or wife or children.
Yeah, yeah.
And usually there's some challenges going on there which are taking away their focus from their work. And it's sort of like this slippery slope where that stress is causing me to underperform here, which is causing me more stress here, which means now I go home and kick the cat because I'm pissed off.
Yeah.
Which exacerbates the stress at home, which then exacerbates the stress at work. So for me, you know, my main sort of intention is helping people resolve their stresses, resolve this perspective that things aren't okay.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like I either help people see that they are, and there's no need to feel uncomfortable or worried or frustrated about it, or we actually get them to a point where they take the required actions to change something in their life.
Nice. I'm going to throw a bit of a curly one at you here, because it's always fascinating when we get into this kind of realm of discussion. And, you know, what do you say to people that might say to you, oh, you know, Brady, you're still young. You know, I'm double, triple your age. What do you know? What do you know about life and all my struggles? How do you answer that?
Yeah. Funnily enough, you know, when I first started, it obviously used to throw me off because I did have that with a couple of people that would pretty much say that out front. And these days I absolutely love it, because the reason I don't categorize myself as a coach as such is because people assume you need experience in life to be able to help someone with theirs. And that's where most life coaches go wrong. They think it's about the external achievements and what I've done and all the bullshit. And that has a certain place, I've walked down that path and now I'm going to guide you through it.
Yep.
But one of the things I recognize is one person can go down a path and be successful and still hate themselves.
Yep.
So for me, I have become very, I guess, inspired to learn what's happening on a deep level in the mind that doesn't allow someone to experience fulfillment.
Yeah. So it's agnostic. Age is not relevant here. Its experience is not relevant. It's more about the core functions of how we think and how we operate as human beings. And if you can understand that, you can help anybody.
And I'm sort of one of these, I guess, humble but obsessed types of people where I will be someone who will actually turn away work if I'm not certain that I can actually add some value. And I'll say, look, there's actually, another guy who's better at doing that. Go see him because he's gonna serve you better. So I have no problem in recognizing where my specialty lies and where it doesn't.
Okay.
And then I'm also this sort of person that will continue to dig deeper to continually improve my processes to become more efficient and more effective in helping people change their lives.
Awesome. Yeah, and really acquire the knowledge that you need to be able to help people at that level that we're talking about, which is independent of life experience in a way.
That's right. And, one of the things I've found is applying it to myself, actually doing the work myself on a consistent basis, which, could be the experience that people want. It's like, well, I actually feel very fulfilled in my life. I am doing what I love every day. If that isn't evident enough for you, then I'm not your guy.
Yeah, I love it. That's great. Well, awesome, Brady. So let's talk a bit more about how you work. I mean, I'd love to hear about how you work with your clients, what type of programs or, methodologies you work with. Maybe give us a bit of a rundown into how you actually work.
Yeah, sure. Typically, I love to have a couple of conversations first. For some people, it's one or two, maybe three.
Yep.
For some people, it's just the first initial conversation. I recognize that they have a challenge that I can be a solution to. And with pretty much everyone that I work with, whether it's a small business client or a business leader or just, a mum at home.
Yep.
I always do a 4-week diagnostic period, which sounds a little bit, cold, but essentially it's just a period of time for me to be able to add heaps of value over those, 2 or 4 sessions, depending on the client.
Mm-hmm.
And they get a really good insight into how I work because I guess my style is quite different to, I guess, a lot of people. I'm quite direct, but also very empathetic.
Okay.
I don't let people hold on to their limitations. I'll kindly rip that away. Give them a nudge. So it gives them, basically an experience of me before actually making that big investment.
Okay.
Because for me, again, in the coaching world, people are promising these huge results in this short amount of time. And people say, I'll change your life, I'll change your business in a month or 2 months. And honestly, it's just ridiculous because if you actually research the greatest athletes, the greatest business people, any people who are great at what they do it day after day, week after week, month after month, year after year.
Definitely. And they've had many failures along the way and had to pick themselves back up and start again.
That's right. So as much as I'm interested in making the biggest difference in the shortest amount of time that I can, I'm also interested in working with someone sort of a little bit long-term to help them integrate their life and their business. Because when I'm sort of fundamentally collapsing someone's identity and belief of who they thought they were for the last 50 years, that takes a little while to actually put into place over the next few months.
Yeah, definitely. So you work a slightly more long term. It's not
Yeah,
a quick band-aid, package and off you go.
correct. It's sort of, it's a little bit more frequency in the beginning of my programs with people, for the first couple of months.
Yeah.
And typically the frequency just sort of drops off, but the long-term consistency stays there.
Is there you still be in touch with them in some frequency for ages.
That's right. We have sessions, sometimes monthly, and then eventually that might go to quarterly.
Yep.
And that's sort of, the longest amount of time I'd spend between clients.
Right. And then at some point, do you say, okay, you don't need me anymore, or just
Pretty
come back
much,
and see me when you do want to have a chat? Or
yeah. Like the best thing that I love, which is, why I do what I do, is when someone says, Brady, I've got this. You know what I mean? They're like, you've given me the facilitation and the guidance that I couldn't see for myself, like where I'm basically pointing out people's blind spots, and
nice. Yeah.
pretty much that's what I do. And then I help them integrate enough so that they're actually applying it with their own self will, so that they have the confidence and the certainty to know I can handle no matter what happens ahead of me.
Love it. Love it. That's fantastic. I mean, and I love to put this into practice. So, I mean, I'd love you to give us a bit of a case study or maybe some stories about past clients without mentioning any names, of course,
Sure.
as to just paint a picture as to how this works for people.
Yeah, well, it's funny. I was trying to think of, one, but there's just so many that are running through my mind at the moment. There's people that I've worked with, where someone's passed away, someone dear to them, has passed away. And that significantly impacted their life,
Yep.
Their relationships with their family members, and their business. So
Yep.
it's basically put a massive load on top of them.
Sure.
And one of the things that I feel really privileged to do under Dr. John Demartini is his grief process. So most people sort of understand, I think it's the 5 stages of grief, which is the process that's been around for quite a long time, about 7 years. John, over his 48 years of research, has developed a methodology that can transform grief into gratitude within about three hours.
Wow.
And I've had the privilege of doing that with about 8 people up until this point, and
wow.
the feedback that I continually have for them, from the conversations I have with them, months and few months later, is it's just completely changed my life, because during that process, they're not only resolving their grief, they're also understanding something new about life, and
Yep.
and there's this new level of certainty that everything's going to be okay, regardless of what happens.
Yep.
So yeah, I like to sort of stay quite confidential, but
Of course.
for me, business leaders, you know what I mean? Like that everyone has people pass away in their life.
Yep.
And from what I've seen over my years of living is that typically rocks people quite hard.
Sure.
And it really places a lot of pressure on people and their lives and their business lives. And, that's one particular service that I offer people, which I know significantly makes a big difference.
Wow. And do you work, with corporates you need to do workshops and seminars as well, or is it more one-on-one basis?
Yeah. So I guess for me, I get contacted quite a little bit to come in and do the one-off workshops, and I typically turn them down because, again, it's people wanting quick fixes.
Yeah, good point.
It's companies going, oh, we've got this happening. Can you come in and run a workshop? And I'm like, well, unless you're going to engage me for at least 6 months because that's what this needs, I'm not going to come in and run one stupid workshop.
Yeah. It's almost like a quick strategy session or something.
That's right. So for me, again, I'm sort of I prefer to work with people who are actually committed to making a change, rather than people who just say they want it.
Yep. Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah.
That makes perfect sense.
So corporates, I've had one-on-one clients predominantly. But I do work with quite a few small businesses, you know, where it relates to their culture, their leadership, and
Yep.
also their personal lives.
Nice. Because, I mean, all this really can tap into or cross over into work culture as well. And I mean,
Exactly.
there's so many areas that this can touch,
Yep.
both professionally and personally. It's
Yeah.
incredible when you think about it.
Yeah, well, you know, for me, that's why I love working with business leaders, because when I make a difference to that individual's life and their leadership capacity, that ripple effects into their team members, which ripple
Yep.
effects into their family members,
Yep.
which ripple effects out in the community,
Definitely.
which is quite cool.
Oh, fantastic. Well, I mean, Brady, that's been sensational. I really appreciate you taking the time to kind of go through what you do and explore some of these concepts for us. And I urge everybody to make, contact with you and learn more about you. So how do we get in touch with you if we want to find out more about what you do?
Yeah, sure. So my website is www.bradycraig.com.au.
Awesome.
I'm on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn. If you just search Brady Craig, I'm sure you'll find me.
Awesome. Are all those links on your website as well?
Yeah, they should be on my website.
Nice. Yep. Great.
But
Excellent.
no, it's been a pleasure, Darren, and I really appreciate the opportunity to
Oh,
come on and share what I do and why I love it.
oh, my pleasure. I mean, really appreciate you coming on the show. It's been a fascinating discussion, and I could go on about this stuff for another 2 hours for sure.
Yeah.
But I hope everybody's really enjoyed that. And I definitely will put all the notes in the show notes and those links in the show notes so you can access Brady and find out more about what he does and how he works. Anything that you want to leave us with today before we finish up?
I think the thing I want to leave people with is let me be the permission to do what you want to do. Not too many people give that to themselves, and sometimes they need someone else to say that first. So,
I like that.
you know, don't mind what people think of you. Just do what you love, find out what that is, and follow it through.
Awesome. And I think what's really struck me from this conversation is how important knowing your North Star is as well. We've all got to do the work to really know what our purpose is, why we do anything. Why are we on this hamster wheel?
Exactly.
What are we actually trying to achieve here?
Yep.
Yep. So I think that's really important. So well done.
Yeah.
Well, Brady, thank you so much again for coming on the show. Really appreciate it. Everybody out there, I hope you had a great episode and enjoyed it as much as I did. If you have any particular questions or you want Brady to come back, please let us know because we'd love to organize number 2. And in the meantime, we'll see you very, very soon for another episode. Bye for now.